Good day, everyone. I'm Brian Ballard with TeamViewer, formerly Upskill for you EWTS regulars. We have an amazing set of speakers lined up for you today, but we're going to kick things off with an expert panel of wearable and AR practitioners that are working everything from fast food and beauty products to some of the machinery and medical devices that we rely on around the globe. We've got today on this panel, William Harding, Distinguished Technical Fellow at Medtronic, Doug House, Manager of Technical Services and Support at Porsche, Jorge Hernandez, the VP of Quality Assurance at the Wendys company, and Agustina Sartori, Director of AR Innovation at Ulta Beauty. So we're going to talk with these experts today to learn from their experiences launching and then scaling AR technologies for their internal and external customers. So to kick things off, we'll start with Agustina. Let's talk a little bit about yourself and what Ulta Beauty is doing in the AR space.
Sure, happy to be here with everybody. And sharing a little bit of my experience in the field. So yeah, I actually started in the AR space, augmented reality, back in 2011. At that time, it was basically starting, like I would say, in the beginnings of even this existing, right? At that time, I studied telematics engineering, and I started a company at that time called Glam Street that built augmented reality for beauty brands. So basically, the idea was, can we enable virtual try-on for makeup companies? So at the time, we were licensing the technology. We licensed it to many of the global brands from Neiman Marcus, Estee Lauder, Duty Free, Clarins, Ulta Beauty being one of my clients at the time. Back in 2018, I think everything started exploding, specifically in the AR beauty space, with one of the biggest acquisitions in the market from L'Oreal at the time of Modiface, right? Which was a huge statement, I think, for the beauty space, because it meant that like augmented reality was here to stay, right? And it was a very specific use case. So since then, in 2018, also Ulta Beauty acquired my company. So I joined the Ulta Beauty team, and I oversee the AR innovation team. So my team belongs part of the digital innovation team, and we basically build differentiated experiences from our guests. And what we do basically is develop innovation that has to do with AR, with AI, mainly focused initially, I think in 2018, 2019, we were focused on AR try-on. And now we are also exploring other types of AR experiences, also with a rear camera. And really bringing new innovation technology to Ulta Beauty that have to do with AR and AI. So that's my role today.
So it's a pretty fascinating use case. We're definitely in the camera age, and you're using this computer vision to help consumers experience your product. And this has touched millions of people so far. How do you feel that AR is changing the excitement level that customers have when they engage with a brand?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And I think if we think about the last years, right, I would say the use of AR in the beauty space changed from being something fun to being something actually that the guest needed, right? If we think about COVID, right, the samples were not available anymore in the stores, right? And there was no other way to try on makeup. So AR became really streamlined and something needed for our guests to experience the different colors, finishes, and textures. So I would say there was a big change since COVID on what does it mean for our guests, right? It really, I mean, the adoption increased dramatically, 10 times more usage we got into our try-on experience. And it's really something that helps the guest experience different colors without any friction today's, without any problem of maybe hygiene in these times that we are living, and also allowing to freely explore, right? At Ulta Beauty, it is always about experimentation. Even before try-on existed, we disrupted the beauty industry by bringing samples into the store. It was, hey, you can try on anything. Now it's like we're in the second wave of the revolution, where we are disrupting, experiencing, and trying through technology, right? So it really changed, I think, the way people are interacting, are shopping online, right? Like if you think about online, makeup is something you really want to see on you. Well, there's no way to try it online, right? So this allows our guests really experience with products and feel closer to them, and maybe even try things that they wouldn't try before, right? So if we talk about like engagement and even metrics of sales, like the guest that uses try-on, the conversion is higher, right? From the engagement standpoint, from the purchase standpoint. Sure. So I think it's just something that really changed the way guests are interacting.
So I've been dying to ask you this, but are we going to see live Ulta Beauty products and Zoom calls in the near future?
That would be awesome, right? I think that would be awesome for sure.
Well, for anyone at EWTS, you hear it here first if it happens.
In these days, right, that we're all working from home and everything, it would be awesome to put some makeup on, right, virtually.
Thank you so much, Agustina. Now, Jorge, you work with a brand we all know and love. I certainly, I think, probably went there in college more often than the dining hall, but you represent a completely opposite side of the spectrum from what we just heard. Tell us a little bit about how Wendy's is using your technology.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm the Vice President of Quality Assurance for Wendy's, in charge of food safety and quality assurance for the entire brand, from the suppliers, the supply chain, distribution centers, and all the way to the restaurants, right? We started our venture into the AR space a couple of years ago. And actually the COVID situation, or the COVID pandemic, should accelerate a little bit more. We have been able to use this technology to allow us to be a lot more efficient and effective in our work. We use it in ways to do remote approval of suppliers, facilities, distribution issues. And with COVID, we had all of those coming up. So it was very, very timely for us to be able to be in this space. We, of course, save time and energy and people traveling and the cost of all of those things. So it allows us to be in multiple geographies at one time with the right expert, with the right person. But we also find now that this technology allows us to be more effective in our work. And what I mean by that, we're able to be in one facility and actually connect with 2 or 3 different experts in an area, whether it's to approve a product, to solve a problem, to do other things that we weren't able to do in the past, and then come with solutions that allows us to solve the issues, identify issues faster, and solve them better for the long term. It's been a very fantastic journey, and I believe that we're just at the beginning of this journey and how to use this and the impact it's going to have to the brand and to our business going forward. We're very excited with it.
Yeah. So when you're interacting with your restaurants and suppliers, how do you quantify those benefits?
Like I said, it helps us a lot with the cost effectiveness of it. It'll help us a lot with bringing the right persons to the right problem, even though they may be in completely different geographies, sometimes across the world. It allows us to be able to interact with the right people, all with focusing on the problem on site at that time. So that has been a very big boost for the company relationships, cross-functional effectiveness of our process has gone, being very, very impactful to how we solve problems.
Yep. Dan, certainly the idea of being able to do this at the point of work, unlike what we're doing right now at our desks, certainly changes the game. Which leads me to our next speaker, Doug House, who's a veteran of EWTS at this point. Doug, why don't you introduce those who are new to you and to how Porsche is taking advantage of augmented reality technology?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. My name's Doug House. I'm the manager of technical support for Porsche Cars North America, based here in Atlanta. We first started with some piloting of AR back in 2016, and then eventually got to a full rollout through a pilot process in 2017 and a full rollout then in 2018 and 19. And what we're doing with AR has been really kind of, I think the best way to describe it is a see what I see type of a use case, where we are able to have a technician working on a vehicle, say he's in Los Angeles, he or she may be in Los Angeles, and we can have experts from Atlanta looking at the car with them, or in some cases we could have another expert that's field-based, maybe that expert is in Denver, Colorado, but we want his expertise on that particular problem in Los Angeles, then we could have a situation where we can have two different experts looking at the same problem, where what we would have previously is maybe we could get one expert to the car to look at it and to help the dealer technician resolve the problem. But the use of AR has allowed us to use two people on that problem, or in some cases, three people on that problem. And we certainly have seen, and I think it's well documented in the industry, and I don't think it's any surprise here, even from a fellow panelist, is that the time to resolution has increased dramatically. We've seen a decrease in downtime as high as 60%, and 40% is pretty normal.
So obviously you talk about this starting in 2016. This is not a flash in the pan demo at this point. How has user sentiment changed amongst your users now that they're used to this capability?
Well, surprisingly, Brian, the adoption was a little slow. We thought after the pilot, and we really had a chance to show it, it would take off. And the adoption was kind of slow. And then we arrived in March of 2020. And I think we all know, as COVID began to hit and the travel restrictions came upon our people, and travel restrictions for a lot of our experts were in place. And in some cases, dealers didn't want additional outside people coming into the stores on top of that. And probably some of the other people can relate to that. And so at that point, the AR adoption really escalated really fast. And we saw the use triple in just 30 days at the start of COVID. So we're running now anywhere from about 15 to 20% of everything we touch is AR. It's become that important, and we do a lot of that and never have an expert leave their desk.
That's pretty phenomenal in terms of efficiency changes when you have that much additional utilization of your workforce. Rounding out our experts, I'm going to next tee up William Harding to introduce himself and how Medtronic is taking advantage of this technology.
Perfect. So I'm William Harding. Excuse the voice, got a little bit of a bug. So I've got a little raspiness going on. I'm a distinguished technical fellow with Medtronic, specifically the Advanced Technologies Data Science Group. And I've been with Medtronic for about 24 years, working on a lot of various different solutions, but specifically in what we classify as XR, or extended reality, augmented and virtual reality, mixed reality. We've been working with solutions roughly about since 2014. Those aspects around our various use cases and scenarios that we've been evaluating were focused mostly on remote assist, training, relative work instructions within assemblies, and surgical, telepresence type environments. So with those mindsets, we started to explore how we could, accomplish the needs of our customers, address those needs, without necessarily, I always try to turn to people and say, don't look for a problem with a solution. You can find a solution. Let's go for a problem. Is within the actual needs of our community to identify what those needs were and characterize whether it's a wearable, mobile, whatever type of device. But what were the benefits? What were the true value propositions associated with augmented reality, extended reality, mixed reality? And within those areas, a number of, let's say, aha moments emerged. When we think of medical procedures as being, you have a patient, you have a doctor, you have consumables, reusables, you have traceability, supply chain. You have all these elements that are associated, though it's a human is really the product. In some cases, implantables are the product. And you're looking for healthy outcomes. You're looking for sufficient outcomes. If I apply that to manufacturing, there was a one-to-one relationship. Reusables, consumables, and traceability, product. You have all the same elements. So with the solutions we were working on for hospital could apply to our manufacturing. And when we think about device manufacturing, We're making pacemakers, defibrillators, diabetes devices. We're making things for spinal. Is the same needs were there. And so we started exploring this from the perspective of how might we, if we define it in those terms, solve for these needs. And so using, not just from my perspective of saying, okay, how do I integrate this new technology? And how do I get it to work interoperably with other technologies securely, kind of within a CIoT type of or clinical IoT perspective. And so it really allowed us to look at things from a technology and we'll say quantitative to a qualitative way of looking at our needs. So with that said, we started examining our stakeholders. And we realized when we looked at AR technology, we were jumping into phases of technology integration that were, we'll say, deficient, were not at the right point. This point of that is beyond the neat, cool things around AR technology or VR, is there is a need to assess your value propositions against all relevant stakeholders. This is an area where a lot of cases companies have failed in their implementation solutions. They don't involve the right stakeholders. We'll say our technologists, my informatics, not just the patient and not just the doctor, the right people, the right time. And so when we're looking at this, you can't just do a Kickstarter or Indiegogo scenarios like, I got a cool idea, let's put it in. You really got to look at it from the perspective of, I need to, from an assessment, from a decision-making, from an adoption to a deployment with design, deployment, sustainability, even end of life, consider all those elements of phased integration in order to actually implement this correctly. So though that's a lot of information, there are barriers, measured risk, elements you really need to consider. Closed loop manufacturing, direct streaming, even as we move AR to AI and machine learning type of scenarios, we need to take a broader perspective. We can't go away into a box and just say, disappear for a couple of years and come out, ta-da, I've got a solution. So this is where we really need to think, engage the right people. It may seem like it's going to slow the process, but if you use the philosophies associated with human-centered design or design thinking, you're more likely to achieve success.
I think this is a great explanation of how Medtronic is taking advantage of internal expertise of AR and MR within your own business practice. I think that's something that a lot of companies can sort of learn from when it comes to taking advantage of the skill set that exists in the community now, but also leveraging folks within their own business who know their business needs better than any outside expert would. So I think that's a really unique point that hopefully people can take away. So we're going to switch into a little bit more of a round robin format right now, focusing kind of just on some questions. Obviously, EWTS has become a very valuable source of information in sharing expertise over the years. Hopefully, these anecdotes that our panelists are going to share give all of you some ideas. Go ahead and start queuing up questions as they come up. We will have time at the end to answer them. And so with that, I'm going to kick it off with where most companies began their journey, which is, as both Doug and Jorge have described, in the area of remote assistance. So particularly, as Doug highlighted, over the last 2 years, remote assistance has really boomed as a way to solve problems when travel is limited. And many pundits see this as maybe an ability that is going to continue forward long into the future now that we've seen it as a viable medium for connectivity. However, none of this takes off, as Doug said, triples overnight unless you've laid the groundwork for scale long beforehand. So Doug, can you tell for folks, maybe since the last time we talked, what did it take to cross over that adoption hump in terms of IT preparedness, management buy-in, and employee buy-in?
Well, I think I'll take maybe for us the difficult one first, IT preparedness. I think we were basically ready on one level from our end, from the Porsche Cars North America and in Atlanta, we were ready. What wasn't ready at the time we started this in 2016 was actual workshops. So you think of a dealer, really any automotive dealer, and you walk in the showroom or you walk in the waiting areas, and yes, there's Wi-Fi and you have the ability to connect and all of that, and that's great. And you would actually see that all of that worked very, very well. But there's a big but here, and that is when you moved out into the actual workshop, then it's not so friendly. And so we had to get in the IT preparedness side. We had to begin to get our actual workshops prepared. The dealers were prepared, so it was there, but we had to move that to the back to the shops. And now we're much more aligned there, and so that's in place and functioning. Adoption from both the users and from management, the management on the PCNA side has been incredible and has bought into this from day one, and we had great support even at the CEO level, and I think that's well documented. What we did struggle with a little bit is at the dealer level. We had some managers that were completely on board with us, and we had some users that were completely on board, and then we had some people that just didn't understand and weren't following what we were doing with the technology. And one of the ways to overcome that, unfortunately, is just use. And once we had the use cases and we could begin to show the cases, and we could take examples, put in examples in front of them and show them, here's a case that without AR took us 16 days to resolve. And this is a real true statement here that I'm getting ready to make. Took us 16 days to resolve, but we had the same case come up, and with AR, we resolved it in 7 minutes. And that's a real statement. And once you have cases like that, and now we don't only have one of those cases, we have dozens and dozens and dozens of those cases. And so now the buy-in is much different. And the users are beginning to say, wow, this really does work, and this technology really is amazing. And it's not some gimmick that some guy sitting in Atlanta thought of, that it really brings a value. And then what you start to see, this has been the fun part for me, is once we get to the customer and the customer begins to realize, wow, this really moved the needle. We had a case where the customer came in with a really significant problem. The dealer kind of began to prepare this young lady that her car would be in the shop for a couple of days while we figured this out. We were able to connect with AR. We were able to fix that car in just a few minutes while she was still in the dealer and give her car back before she had time to leave. And so when you start to see this, then the adoption totally changes.
I can say that I have wished that scenario would have happened to me in the past. I'm sure many of the folks in the crowd have as well. So we're going to keep switching the topics up a little bit. Agustina, so we just focused on a use case that requires two to tango, right? You've got your expert and your remote assistants. Your technology is actually quite different than that. It's about a single person's experience by themselves with technology supporting it, but scaled across potentially millions of people. So it's a very different approach to scaling. You've focused on the technology to support that differently. And I think that perspective is also very valuable in this audience. How have you thought about the content management, whether you think of that as digital product inventory or something different, to support that consumer scale of AR? And have you had to embrace any unique challenges or overcome them to support that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, Doug, you touched a great point on the adoption side. I think that's something that when we're developing these types of technologies that are new, and like it's new ways of doing things, it's a change of mindset of whoever is using it. Is it a consumer? It's a consumer. It's like a person that is an employee of the company, right? Whatever it is, it's not easy, right? And I think that also links back to when we talk about adoption and we talk about scale and yes, being able to have a higher distribution of the virtual assets, for example, right? I think it also links back to adoption, but it links back to adoption of the company, for instance, right? Of understanding that this is not a one-off experience, AR experience, nice to have, that is like managed by a small team. But how can we make that part of the process of the company, right? For instance, when we launch new makeup products at Ulta Beauty, there's a whole process that goes through from merchandising, right? To adding it into the site, to getting the assets, to getting, for a normal product, forget about the AR for a second. And I think any e-commerce site has all of these processes that allow you to onboard new products into the site. Well, if you think about AR, when we started this, right, and we launched this in 2016 in the app at Ulta before the acquisition of my company, because they were again a client of ours at the time. It was kind of like, well, my team was doing a bit of everything. They were developing the technology, they were calibrating, we call it calibration, right? Calibrating the assets that we needed for virtually try-on products. It was a manual process, right? Like the ability of adding new shades, new products, new colors, how you do that in a way that it's accurate, that it's not gimmicky to the point, right? That it's actually realistic and real to life, right? And it was a process that my team did as a whole, right? But if you really want to scale this, you need to move from it being a process that a team does that develops it, in our case, the innovation team, right now, to something that is embedded in the company's process. So right now, for instance, a big win that we had at the beginning of this year, we finally were able to really involve AR and the creation of AR assets as part of the merchandising process. So basically, they have a team now that what they do is, in the same way that they make sure, for example, they have the right photos, the right assets, the right product description and details, they also make sure they have the right AR assets calibrated for this brand to be able to be part of the try-on experience. So it was a long road to get there, right? But I think now we're in a place that we are technology innovators as part of the innovation team, but we could operationalize, we call like the calibration process of AR try-on, right? And I think that is key for any company that is looking to do this at scale. How do you, like, having the mindset of saying, okay, it's fine that we do it like this because it's small, but at some point we need to operationalize it and it needs to be part of the processes of the company, right? So in our case, with COVID, what happened was we could accelerate the creation of assets to have a higher distribution of SKUs. We have more than 13,000 SKUs that are able to be tried on virtually, right? Because we had a time that we collaborated with many of the associates that were not in the stores because the stores were closed, and we have more than 70, 80 people working with us in a period of time where they were ramping up on this product calibration. So basically swatching products, getting the color, the finish, the coverage, adding those assets to the library, leveraging our technology. So post-pandemic, like I would say actually December, January, we have the majority of our makeup assortment already calibrated. So this work would have taken 2 years to make. We accelerated because we had people that could be doing this, right? And we trained them. And I think it also speaks to how can people reinvent themselves, right? There were people that were associates in the store, and now we're calibrating and creating AR assets, right? So this was amazing. And in a way, it set us up to say, okay, this can be done by somebody else that is not a technology, not an innovation team. It can be done by a person with a business background, an administrator, and you need to put the right tools in place for that to be able to happen, right? But I think now it's owned by the business, by merchandising, and it being part of the process, it also allows us to keep innovating, right? So I think it's important that if you want to do this at scale, it needs to be part of the process of your company at some point. It's fine that at the beginning it's not, but you need to find the path there. Yep. Because I think that's how you can create then other AR experiences, other AI experiences that actually differentiate your brand or company, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure like all of our panelists can relate to that. Like for anybody in the audience that's had a process where you feel like it's leveraging this technology, but it's a bolt-on to the process, like that's one thing, and maybe solving a problem. But to Agustina's point, if you think about things in terms of how you're producing training materials, 3D content, et cetera, with AR in mind, you'll be far more prepared for when you want to take advantage of this technology at scale. And Agustina's company is doing this with beauty products with like facial recognition, which is extremely complex in its own right. Companies building 3D part models for manufacturing process have just as complicated as a set of use cases, but with smart planning, can take advantage of that at scale as well. And that's, I think, what's really exciting about seeing these companies engage us at a consumer level, because consumer by definition is scale, it's ultimate scale in a lot of cases. And a lot of those processes, I think we can learn from our panelists on. So I've got a question that's probably top of everybody's mind, considering we're all doing this remotely right now. Normally EWTS, we're all together, we're trying on different types of hardware together in person. Hygiene has now become a new gate to scaling. If you're in the wearable space and you have glasses as your format of AR or MR media, how have you embraced hygiene, like whether it's hardware or personal hygiene, to enable your associates to take advantage of glasses right now? William, I'm going to start with you, since with Medtronic, the bar for hygiene is probably second to none.
I appreciate that. Actually, it is extremely important beyond the COVID aspects. And if you characterize within Medtronic medical device manufacturing, think about, okay, I'm going to put a device in somebody's body. What do I think about foreign material, getting into that, handling of that material? Think about the person who's, we think of COVID. Yeah, the COVID virus might die in a few days, but there's beyond just COVID. And think about what you're transferring into a patient. So within the perspective of that, I also add into hygiene as use of the technology within, we'll say, almost like surgical or clean room environments. So then beyond hygiene, and we think of viral or bacterial or foreign material that's inert being released, there's also consideration around electrostatic discharge. There's areas around other aspects of influence. So when we think about hygiene, and I'll use an example. I go into a manufacturing production line, class 10,000 or class 100,000. I'm wearing a HoloLens or Vuzix or a RealWear type device, as an example. And when I enter there, I've got a powered device. Besides the material sloughing off or coming off that could go into a product. And the rules relative to how do I clean that, maintain it, that it's used properly. I also have to consider my proximity of using that device to a product. Am I electrically stimulating that product? Am I causing a short? So even the invisible aspects of, technically hygiene, we think of invisible, but the cleaning of the products, the appropriate testing of those products to make sure that we are actually compliant with the rules we say about maintained within clean rooms. But another element that's important that we need to consider is things like we're working with NIH on, as an example, is when we think about, we'll say Doug's at home, and I'm a doctor, and I'm talking to Doug and said, okay, I need to do a visual assessment. Doug, I need you to pass your temperature sensor over to me. I need to pass the data to me. I need to assess your blood pressure. There's an element that we also have to consider, that though that remote experience maintains Doug's safety, helps me from being out in the world, getting other people infected, Doug's got to be considerate of, do I trust the data from William's device? So hygiene moves into elements beyond electrical, beyond like ESD, beyond the physical elements of bacteria and viral, but also trust or identity, safety of the data. So while we're maintaining the benefits of a hygienic type scenario of distancing and Doug and I assessing diagnostics or monitoring, we have to consider how do we trust that data. So that brings you into when we think of hygiene relative to, AR, VR, MR is BYOD, bring your own device. Do we trust that Agustina sent Doug a headset? Do we trust the security of that device? Do we trust Doug be able to use that device without making his conditions worse? So it really opens up a lot of other opportunities around data protection, personal protection, and safety of devices and so on. So from Medtronic's perspective, we're embracing some of the standards associated with TIPS, which is trust, identity, privacy protection, safety, security. And we're utilizing it within some of the standards being established by IEEE to say, are we compliant? What does my maturity model say about my ability to use these devices and maintain safety and protection for the patient, as well as within the manufacturing device environment, so that I'm maintaining high quality product output.
Makes sense. Jorge, when you're shipping devices out to enable this remote assistance capability, obviously, like the hygiene between different folks using is something to take into account. How have you embraced that for your employees' safety and hygiene as well?
So actually, because we're in the quality assurance department, food safety, quality assurance, and safety of the cleaning and sanitizers are just part of what we do and everything we do. So we just make sure that the equipment, it becomes part of what we have to do to prepare to do an assessment or to prepare to do into a facility. This is not different to us. That they bring in almost every other piece of equipment to be able to do our metrics or to be able to calibrate anything that we have within a facility. It's just one of the things that we have to do to be able to execute a job, whether it's in a food processing plant or whether it's in a distribution center or inside one of our kitchens. We just have processes and procedures we have to follow for each one of them. So it was nothing additional. It's just something we have to do to everything that we do when we come to those.
Yeah, so you're just including wearables as part of your process. And Doug, has Porsche embraced a similar process as well? You also, obviously, I know we're in the age of electrical cars, but I'm sure you have oil and other things in the factory that you're also trying to make sure does not get on the devices as well.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when William was talking, is that to some degree we have kind of the reverse of that, in that it's very easy for the devices to become damaged due to the shop conditions. There's a lot of different things going on in the shop, and so we have to take some steps to prepare to protect the devices from damage themselves. From there's a lot of moving equipment and stuff. At times in the shop, we have lifts, we have jacks, we have air tools, power tools of different kinds, and a lot of different things going on in the shop. And so we have to protect the device that way, from the standpoint that it is an asset of the dealers that they have purchased. And so we have to take some precautions that way. And another thing that we have attempted to do a little bit, and that is that we kind of limit the users to try to help with the safety. We don't want, if you have a shop that's got 30 technicians in it, we don't want all 30 of them using it. We try to limit that down to a shop foreman, lead technician. And so we try to protect some of the personal hygiene that way a little bit. And then at the same time, that also then protects the equipment as well.
Yeah. So that's a good point in terms of how you operationalize your technology. So I've got 3 questions to go, or 2.5 questions to go in 8 minutes, and then we'll turn it over to audience Q&A. But I'm sure a lot of folks in the audience are going to have some specific questions about exactly how you've employed that in your processes, because we've gotten those questions in the past from folks. Now, I want to switch this away from some of the process size of things and into the human experience of the folks using your technology. Obviously, as we talk about augmented rather than replacing reality, the person is at the center of that. So, Jorge, I'm going to turn this one to you, as many of your employees have tried out this technology. How has employee engagement changed in work process when you use AR as part of their tool set?
What we're finding is very interesting. As part of as the start of use of this technology, we're finding that a certain type of folks, specifically younger employees, are very much into it. They're more intuitive into it than some of the other folks. A little bit, I don't want to say resistant, but they're a little bit more cautious about being able to use the technology. And in fact, as we tried with different types of staff, the staff that seems to be more excited about it are the ones who seem to be a lot more the younger generation, the ones that are be able to use it. And it actually has been one of those things where they want to be the ones trying it first, being able to use it and be able to do that. And they provide us a lot of them provide us a lot of their first use cases to like Doug said, to, I don't want to say convince, but I'm going to say to help justify, the use into some of the other folks to be able to do that. So we use them, once we identify that this is something that they I don't want to say more, they were more natural, that they were more able to do that. That we use that to be able to get more use cases and continue to build a story and the narrative about why this is good, how it can help us, and why it would be a good idea to start using it more in the operations. That's probably one of the biggest things that, I was very interested in, when I started bringing it out. Yeah. Then once that happened, then there was a lot of people who start following that. But it's been a very good lesson for us.
I imagine you don't see a lot of, and we hear this from a lot of folks, you don't see a lot of technologies where it spreads, to some extent, somewhat virally, where someone's excited about, they tell somebody else. And because in a lot of cases, this is a more than one person experience, it is something you share and has a networking effect to it. Do you see this continuing to expand inside your operations across other use cases, maybe as people get used to it?
Absolutely. In fact, we're just at the beginning of our journey with this type of technology. And now that we're using it, there have been a number of other departments, from training to risk management to operations, who started to look at the technology, in part because of the technology itself, but in large part because the people who are using it are excited about using it, and they're starting to show how it can improve, their performance and their effectiveness in their work. So yes, you're absolutely right.
So I've got a question for William on this one. So William has done a significant amount of work, and a lot of it's public, so folks can look into it, using mixed reality in both simulation and training environments. One of the things that really stood out to me, William, in your exploration is you talk about the skill sets it takes to embrace MR and how accessible it is these days. What skill sets do our attendees need to have to embrace MR, and how do you see that changing over the next 2 years?
Really good idea. Good question there. And even I'll address one of the things that Jorge said relative to age is in our assessment of technology, what we want to put in within our manufacturing and surgical environments. We found that we did extensive research on age, and age actually turned out to be irrelevant. It was really accessibility to the technology. So age wasn't a determining factor around technology laggers or early adopters. So with that being said, most of the information we acquired from voice of the customer, from phenomenological research and qualitative research, was age was irrelevant, gender was irrelevant, accessibility was important, but it was more the behaviors and the personalities. And when we looked at technology adoption, and I'll use kind of examples what we did at Stanford around design thinking. It was really, if we look at leadership styles, transformative leadership, transparency, accountability, the ability of the person to work quickly in a group, regardless of titles, of technological skill. So surprising aha moments is we were able to get the same capability and ability to integrate from an HR person, from a regulatory person, from a shop floor production person, by getting rid of those egos, those elements. But if I looked at a specific person by title, in medical specifically, the title's an informatician, is an evolving role as a stakeholder who really has been very beneficial to us in our ability to integrate technology. But the point is to keep in mind is when we think of technology adoption, we also have to define what adoption means. Adoption is not assessment. A lot of people get that confused. Adoption is, I think, even Jorge and Doug alluded to this, is maybe Doug specifically around his solutions in Porsche, is the ability to integrate with existing solutions, the ability to work interoperably. And so a lot of times we get this myopic barriers around our eyes that says, this is the only thing I'm working on. We don't understand the causal relationship. So getting people with broad backgrounds, I personally love working with artists, musicians. I look, it's an interesting way they think, but a horse farrier or a person that works in this, areas of house cleaning it's really on me, the ability to understand who can provide value. And I'll throw out a little quote I like, is from Einstein. If you can't explain it quick, if you can't explain it simply, you probably don't understand it well enough. And the point of that is it's on me to explain it, the need, the technology, the adoption to the person, where I found almost any person can be a valuable asset in this. So I wouldn't categorize to the age, gender, or otherwise.
So I think that's a good segue into maybe my final question. I'm going to aim this one at Agustina. So both Jorge and William maybe painted an arc about how important accessibility is into the success you're going to have with AR. as more people experience AR and MR in their daily lives, how do you feel like that's going to impact the acceptance and engagement of AR and MR both at work and in life outside of the office?
I mean, I think the more experiences that we see out there, the better, right? Because like, again, I feel like we're still at the beginning of this type of experiences, right? And if we think about, like in our case, there's a long way to go, you know, like there's a lot more that we could create, yes, but also there's a long way to go to people to adopt it and feel like, yes, this is the way to go. And I think case studies are great when it's something internal, but when it's something external, it's like, well, I want the person to be asking for it, right? How do I, and our challenge is like, how do we get people even to try it, right? Like that's kind of been our challenge. It's like when they try it, they engage, but how do we get people to use it, right? And as we think about like augmented reality, virtual reality in our lives, it's clearly here to stay, and it will be more and more and more. I think in everything that we do, there's so many use cases, and I think seeing these practical use cases that actually solve a problem, right, is important, right? Because like, again, this is not just something gimmicky and something that it's like fun, do this, it solves a problem. So I think people like you know, William, Doug, Jorge here talking about how does technology solve a problem is key, right? Because let's use augmented reality, virtual reality to solve a problem, and not only to make a fun experience, right? So I think it's evolving in that direction, which is like,
Yep.
Technology is solving a problem, and how businesses can start thinking differently in leveraging these technologies to solve a problem that they have, right?
Yeah, and I certainly think you're right about that. And I do think also that over time, like when it starts becoming the way you've done it successfully in the past, it starts becoming an expectation that that's how it's going to be done for all use cases, and then disappears into the fabric of how we work. And it's no longer, oh, you're using an AR. It's just, well, of course you're using AR. You should be using AR. It's incredible. So I think like that's the future that we're all hoping to see as our technology and our practices evolve. So we're going to turn this over to the audience next for some Q&A. Love to hear the audience's thoughts. And while we have our panel together, give you a chance to tap our thoughts, answer your questions. And with that, we will suddenly appear again, but this time in a live view.